Before the sun came up over Charleston Harbor, the city was quiet, not peaceful, just still. The kind of stillness that makes every sound feel louder than it should be. Water moving against wood, a distant call from the shore, the weight of knowing that if something goes wrong, there is no second chance. Now imagine standing on the deck of a Confederate ship in that moment, not as a soldier, not as an officer, but as an enslaved man who knows every inch of that harbor better than the people who claim to own it. That man was Robert Smalls. And on one night, 1862, he made a decision that would change his life and American history forever. Welcome back to Lex on the Record. I'm your host, Lex, and today we're talking about Robert Smalls, a man who didn't wait for freedom to be handed to him. He studied the system designed to trap him, and then he outsmarted it. Robert Smalls was born in 1839 in Beaufort, South Carolina, into slavery. From the moment he was born, the world tried to tell him exactly who he was allowed to be, and more importantly, who he wasn't. And when he's still young, he's sent to Charleston to be hired out. Now, while that phrase might sound businesslike, let's make it clear it was not. It means his labor, his time, and his body were being rented. Charleston at this time was a very busy port filled with ships, cargo, and constant movement. And while most people saw chaos, Robert saw patterns. He worked on the docks, he listened, he watched how ships moved through the harbor. He learned the tides, the channels, the signals. Over time, he does become a skilled maritime worker, eventually serving as a pilot. A pilot knows where the water is shallow, where the sandbars are, when to move, when to wait. In a guarded harbor, a pilot controls access to freedom. The Confederacy didn't realize it, but they had given Robert Smalls proximity to power and, most importantly, knowledge. By the time the Civil War is underway, Robert is working aboard a Confederate transport ship called the Planter. The Planter wasn't just any ship. It carried supplies, carried troops, and most importantly, it carried information between Confederate fortifications in Charleston Harbor. Robert Smalls knew the ship inside and out. He also knew something else. If he ever tried to escape alone, the risk would be devastating. But fortunately, Robert wasn't planning to escape alone. He had a wife and he had children, and the other members of the enslaved crew also had people that were important to them. This wasn't just about survival, this was about responsibility. In May of 1862, Robert Smalls saw his opportunity. The white officers aboard the Planter went ashore for the night, leaving the ship in the hands of the enslaved crew. This wasn't something that was unusual. In that familiar area, that comfort was the Confederacy's mistake. In the early hours before dawn, Robert Smalls and the crew took control of the ship. There was no chaos, no shouting, no panic, because panic would have gotten them immediately killed. Robert stepped into the role he had already mastered, the role of being the pilot. He positioned himself exactly where the captain would normally stand because he understood something critical. Guards don't always see what's actually in front of them. They see what they expect to see. The Planter pulled away from the dock. Robert guided the ship through Charleston Harbor using the correct routes, the correct timing, and the correct signals. Every checkpoint, every routine, and then before leaving the harbor, the ship stopped. Family members were on board, wives, children. There wasn't an escape. This wasn't an escape for one man. It was an escape for an entire community. Finally, the Planter approached Fort Sumter, the same fort where the first shots of the Civil War had been fired. Robert Smalls held steady. The signals were given. The ship passed through. And once the Planter cleared Confederate waters, Robert raised a white flag, not in surrender to the Confederacy, but to the United States Navy. The ship, its cargo, and its intelligence were seized as a prize of war. And just like that, Robert Smalls had done the unthinkable. He stole a Confederate ship, outran the harbor defenses, and delivered himself, his family, and his crew into freedom. Of course, the story spread quickly because it wasn't just daring, it was straight up humiliating. An enslaved man had outsmarted the Confederate military in one of the most heavily guarded ports. Robert Smalls became a symbol. But here's what I want you to sit with. Nothing about him changed that night. The intelligence was already there. The leadership was already there. The skill was already there. The only thing that changed was the label the world had placed on him. After his escape, Robert Smalls continued working as a pilot, this time for the Union. And after the war ended, he didn't disappear into history, he stepped into it. During Reconstruction, Robert Smalls became a political leader in South Carolina. He served in the state legislature, and later he served multiple terms in the United States House of Representatives. He was part of the first generation of Black lawmakers fighting for civil rights in a country that was already trying to undo progress. Reconstruction was not a peaceful era. It was dangerous, it was unstable, and it required courage of a different kind. Robert Smalls had already risked his life for freedom. Now he was risking his safety and reputation to define what freedom actually meant. History often freezes people in one historic moment, but Robert Smalls didn't stop after the planter. He kept going because escaping oppression is one battle. Living free and fighting for others to do the same is another. Robert Smalls didn't succeed because the system suddenly became fair. He succeeded because he learned how it worked. He studied its routines, its blind spots, its assumptions, and then he used those assumptions against it. So if you're in a season where you feel underestimated, overlooked, or boxed in by expectations, remember Robert Smalls. Remember that sometimes the most powerful move isn't breaking down the door, it's walking through the cracks no one thought you were capable of finding. If this story moved you, challenged you, or taught you something new, take a moment to like, subscribe, and share this story. And make sure you're back next week. I'll see you next time.
Stay bold, stay kind till we meet again. This is our history, our power, our pen.